Now I'm pleased to introduce Jan Schwartzberg from Tatum Engineering, Tatum's operations department, and also serves as a project manager for focusing on energy efficiency in existing buildings. She brings deep expertise in navigating the complexities of the adaptive reuse of the projects. And today she'll share her experience with the Syracuse bread factory. It's an inspiring example of turning a former industrial building into a high performance asset. Jan, we're excited to hear from you. Take it away. Thank you again so much for participating today. Another great project.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, I'm going to be talking about the Syracuse bread factory. And as you can see, we will be doing some imagining or reimagining. How are we going to transform this derelict industrial site into a carbon neutral, high-performing, future-forward building? I'm showing credits right at the start because I am so lucky to be telling this story on behalf of our brilliant team of engineers, architects, and sustainability consultants who are undertaking this awesome project in Syracuse, New York. And just look at the building we imagine. How are we transforming this neglected industrial site? Over the past year, our team has worked hard to help the bread factory start to meet some challenging goals. We're aiming to create a resilient, carbon neutral building that benefits all stakeholders, that's innovative, that has low embodied carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, and that is truly a sustainable community asset. The Syracuse Bread Company's factory was one of the first purpose-built American factories for mass-producing bread. It was completed in 1913, 15 years before the introduction of commercial sliced bread. It is a rare surviving example of a commercial building designed by Wellington Ward, the most prominent Syracuse architect of the early 20th century. But now the bread factory is in an alarming state of disrepair. There are holes in the roof that have damaged the interior. The building is overgrown, yet for all of this, it is structurally sound. And this is key. This underpins one of the big whys of this project. Why undertake a project like this? Why? Because of the embodied carbons from reusing the shell and whatever else can be used. In this case, that will be wood and wood planking from the beautiful floors and ceilings. As we know, standard estimates of embodied carbon savings for a gut rehab compared to new construction range from 50 to 75%. Our embodied carbon calculations for this project are not done. It is still in design, but our half-baked results point to savings towards the higher end of that range. This project is the brainchild of Jason Evans, who is part of the building's ownership team and also the project architect. He is also a native of Syracuse, a graduate of Syracuse University. He's just incredibly committed to this city. His plan for the building includes apartments. There will be studio space for artists and other creatives. And he is hoping to lock down an anchor tenant soon, since we don't know much about who will be occupying the commercial spaces. Right now, we are designing for at least one all-electric commercial kitchen and plain vanilla boxes for the rest. The project site is in a New York State designated disadvantaged community, a potential environmental justice area, and a clean energy community. Jason decided to obtain historic status for the building so it could qualify for the tax credits as a way to save the building from demolition by neglect. That's a big part of the project's financial plan. Another piece of the financial puzzle was to apply for funding through NYSERDA's Building of Excellence Early Design Support Program, and that's how my employer, Tatum Engineering, became involved with this project. We have collaborated with the owner/architect, Ashley McGraw, on several projects, and we are an approved Buildings of Excellence consultant. So our team applied to NYSERDA and received an award. And a few months later, I was tasked with coordinating and managing the early design project. No doubt, having a really compact, familiar team has been a huge advantage for a project that relies on an integrated design approach to move seamlessly from evaluating any number of design decision points through energy modeling, say, and then proceeding with design. So back to the building. The site of the building is important now as it was when it was built. In 1913, its location was half a block from where the New York Central Railroad tunneled under the Erie Canal. This made it a prime commercial location. Today, the important things about the location are that it sits between a residential neighborhood and a low-rise commercial area. And there's a vacant lot across the street where the railroad tracks used to be. How does this fit into our goal of transforming the building? We first need to go back in time for a bit. When we kicked off the early design project, a lot of thought and discussion went into Passive House certification, specifically FIAS Passive House Core Revive. Unfortunately, at that time, Passive House Core Revive was not available for buildings of this size, which is about 62,000 square feet. At that time, then, the team decided we would nevertheless stick to Passive House design principles to the extent feasible. And based on that, the architect made one decision that down the road made Passive House certification really not attainable. How did that happen? For historic buildings, there are strict rules about changing the facade. This meant that aside from fenestration, envelope improvements to create a continuous air barrier need to be done on the building's interior. So we first looked at the windows. We needed metal frame windows to match the originals, and we found that Zola windows, which we at Tatum had plenty of previous experience with, and which meet Passive House standards, fit the bill perfectly. Great. But what about the walls? There are two main exterior wall types. There are actually 5 altogether, but these are the most predominant ones. So there's stucco with terracotta structural tile, and there's brick. Now, the architect was committed to preserving some features that give building its character and visual appeal, and this meant preserving some of the interior brick face on these exterior walls, especially in the commercial spaces. So not furring them out, not insulating them, not covering them with drywall. In short, no continuous air barrier. Then, after a few months, certification under Passive House Core Revive did become available for a building of this size, but by that time, the die was cast, the architectural design was well advanced as we were kind of under the gun to get the project submitted on time to ship out the State Historic Preservation Office in order to meet their requirements and also to keep our design on schedule. Meanwhile, while we were discussing windows and envelope, we also started our eQuest modeling. As part of this process, you can see that we looked at 3 envelope options and even the least efficient scenario, so the one with the most uninsulated brick, achieves a 40.2 reduction in source energy use compared to baseline. Just look at this slide for a minute. Okay. One constraint that relates to maintaining the historical facade was also the issue of view from the street. So rooftop equipment, including solar panels, should not be visible to passersby. This means larger than code required setbacks. Dom, our design department manager, prepared a worst case scenario sketch. If we went with an air source heat pump system, how much equipment would have to go on the roof and where could it go? And then would there be any space left for solar PV? Our energy modeler had calculated the amount of PV that we need to make the building zero energy, and we consulted with GreenSpark, a solar company out of Rochester, to estimate the maximum capacity the roof could produce. All of this information, with roof space at such a premium, really tipped the scales towards a geothermal system. But our proposed well field site was that vacant lot across the street, which presented some obstacles, mainly bureaucratic obstacles, such as rights of way, excavating under the road, coordinating with utilities. In this case, in case the obstacles could not be overcome, our mechanical engineer Brendan investigated the option of directional drilling, which would be drilling downward at an angle through the basement floor. This would have been prohibitively expensive. And after a few months of work using it, the vacant lot across the street was a go. And so we began designing in earnest. Just a quick breather here to emphasize that NYSERDA's early design support from the Buildings of Excellence program was essential to complete all this work before the team formally even kicked off schematic design. This included everything from the study of windows, exploring passive house and other certifications, the modeling, renewables, embodied carbon analysis, and more. Things really coalesced at the end of 2024, and the team at Tatum got working on design. So let's have a look and see how that is turning out. I'm going to go through these schematics fairly quickly, but I hope you can see how Brendan, our mechanical engineer, designed the core of the system for heating and cooling, and then integrated the domestic hot water and the ventilation components to make a really cohesive system that will handle the varied uses of the buildings and its occupants during the cooling season and in the heating system, which dominates in Syracuse. But, and there's always another but, is it safe to have all the vital mechanical equipment off the roof? This concern arose as design progressed. We use a spreadsheet tool that Tatum created in-house to evaluate risks using FEMA data and other resources. We also studied hydrology maps, as sometimes like small waterways are hidden by city infrastructure, and our focus was flooding. The results were good. The bread factory is not in a floodplain and should be safe from flooding. On the other hand, Syracuse frequently tops the list of US cities with the highest annual snowfall, and it does get very, very cold in the winter. It turns out that locating equipment on the roof might even be the riskier option. So consider that this building is structurally sound and has stood for more than 100 years, with the only significant damage being some areas of roof collapse. So this bodes well for the future. And speaking of the future, we will be completing design development next month, and we're finishing up the embodied carbon calculations. The ownership team is working to lock down its commercial tenants. From our modeling results, we are looking at really great energy performance of at least 20% better than code. They will actually be much higher, but I don't. Not comfortable sharing that since nothing is finished yet. We are hopeful that there will be some space on the roof for solar panels, with others across the road on the wellfield site to get us to our zero energy goal. And within a few months, NYSERDA will have a detailed case study on this project available, so please check in at the NYSERDA website. You're also welcome to email me or the team at info@tatum.com. And thanks so much for letting me tell you about the Syracuse Bread Factory.
Jan, thank you so much. That was great. That was exactly what we were hoping for. It's a cool project. You also really described clearly the power of the NYSERDA Buildings of Excellence program. They're going to have a report. They're going to show what you're doing. They're going to be able to share that. So thank you so much.